Okay, I think we are good to kick things off. Welcome to the webinar. Here's who we have online today. I'm Perry. I do product marketing at Vercel, focus on all things AI. I'll hand it over to Ari.
Hey guys, I'm Ari. I'm a PM and engineer on the AI team here, and I'll turn it over to Drew.
Hey y'all, looking forward to chatting today. My name is Drew. I am in Austin, Texas, so shout out the one person I saw in Austin in the chat. My team helps folks evaluate Vercel, Next, architecture, technical questions, stuff like that. And as of this week, helping out with V0 too.
Sweet. Okay, I'm just gonna jump right in to our questions, and feel free to just keep dropping them in the chat or in the Q&A function. First up, can you use custom fonts in V0?
Yeah, the answer very quickly is yes. You can ask V0 to change the fonts in any of your generations. It'll use fonts from Google Fonts typically. And actually, I can just show you quickly. The way that works is...
I'm really curious to see what your battery percentage is on today, Ari.
Hey, it's better. I was prepared this time. And so
I think we've got your wrong screen here. We're looking at a Discord chat.
Oh, it wouldn't be a...
There we go.
There we go. Okay. So if you have a just like UI generation, like this multi-step wizard component, I maybe should have picked something a little bit shorter. But basically what V0 can do is import different fonts from Google Fonts. So you'll see an import from like Google/Next/fonts. And then in the preview, you'll actually see different fonts being applied. The interesting thing you can also do with this is like if you want visual controls to like test out different fonts, you can ask V0 to add a button or something that'll like change the font on demand, or like, can you make a drop down that lets me switch between fonts? So here's like a little onboarding modal. It does its thing. What we can ask now is like, can you now make the same modal or wizard, but use manrope for all the text? And what you'll see is that V0 will import the manrope font and then apply it to the component. And in these imports, you can see it's importing from Next Font Google, and then that's where that font is coming from. And while it regenerates for a second, we will hopefully see a preview soon.
That switch statement's really getting you here.
Yeah. I saw another question in the chat about like how to make these kinds of regenerations faster. So we actually, so first, here you go. Here's manrope. It's a new font. And you can see it in the preview. And the way it's importing it is like the correct standard practice way to import it in your code. So when you use this code, it'll work super well. I would maybe recommend that you do this import at like a higher level CSS file or in like a shared layout somewhere, so that you can use it across your application. But in general, it's a good import structure.
Nice. Were you about to answer another question?
Oh, yes. There was a question about like, would it be great? It would be great to see a faster iteration speed on page rewrites. So we rolled out diffs relatively recently, like last week or so. So for like files of a certain length, depending on characteristics of the rewrite, we will, instead of generating the whole thing from scratch, we'll just generate the difference between the first version and the second version. So that should speed up these generations a lot. We're rolling it out a little bit slower because we're testing out to make sure that it doesn't break things, and it's not like losing context or losing parts of your previous generations. But on middle length rewrites, you'll now see like diffs be the default. This was a much larger rewrite, so we didn't see it here, but on medium length ones, you'll see it.
Nice. Okay, another question from the Q&A is, do you have the ability to use other component libraries other than ChadCN?
So yeah, you can. Drew, actually, if you just did this demo, maybe you want to pull up.
Yeah, let me pull up the. Let's see
But
here.
basically,
Chat history.
V0 can basically use anything from like any public NPM packages. So that includes things like Material UI, for example. It is much better at ShadCN. Like the designs it creates will probably look more aesthetic and look better when it uses ShadCN components, because our training is just like better suited for is skews very heavily towards like really good generations that use ShadCN UI. But here you go. Here's an example of like pricing page using Material UI components. You can see it looks very different from the typical like ShadCN style. And yep, you can see those imports there. It's using the components and like the use theme hook, both from at MUI/material.
Nice.
Yeah. All it took was I actually used the fix with V0 feature once. It spit out one error. I clicked on the fix with V0 button, and then I got this. I did tell it once. I gave it a screenshot, said, fix the layout design. This isn't great. And it actually does. That's the wild thing about V0. You can just like, make it pop, and it will fix it if you give it the visual feedback.
Nice. Okay, another question. Can I use V0 to contribute to an existing code base?
Yeah, you 100% can. Like if you're building new components from scratch, as like atoms or molecules for your code base, you can just install them via CLI. We give you a for any UI generation you have, you get a there's this add to code base little snippet. And you can use this to add via the ShadCN CLI any components to your existing code base. If you don't have a code base, this will like scaffold a new next project for you. But that's the easiest way to get it to like add things to your code base. If you want more context from your code base, right now the easiest way to do that is by uploading sources about like docs or any other information you have about how your code base operates. We are cooking on a lot of features that are going to make like integration with your code base much easier and much simpler. So stay tuned for more of those updates.
This leads to a fun question in the chat to Ari. What upcoming feature are you personally most excited by?
That's a hard question. There's two things I think that are going to be particularly interesting. One will come out relatively soon. One might take a little bit longer. One that will come out relatively soon is multi-file support. So I think there was another question in the chat about this, about like how to get V0 to compose multiple components or put like different parts of pages together. And right now you can see that our block view only supports one file. What we will be coming out with soon is the ability to see multiple files that are composed together in that view. So again, our goal is to help you build with best practices, and modularizing your components is a very good best practice. And this is going to make that easier. And it'll also allow you to build more complex things with V0. So that's the short-term one. I'll stick to that one for now, maybe.
Nice. Cool. Another question is, I see a few things about this in the chat, but what happened to the previous interface of V0? So the focus on generative UI, and then also related to that, will themes be returning?
Yeah, so for the first part, we we think that we like, again, we started V0 with this vision of like, it's going to be the best tool to like use AI to generate UI. But over time that like, we realized that, you know, in most front-end frameworks, the like line between UI and like client-side logic is pretty blurred. It's pretty muddy. You know, it's something like this onboarding modal that has like logic built into it. It's still UI, but it has a lot of client-side logic. And then from there, we took one step further and we're like, okay, like this is something we want people to be using every day. We want them to be using it across all the different kinds of things they have to do for work. And for front-end developers, a lot of your time isn't spent building like net new UI. There's a lot of other parts of the development process. And we just wanted to build something that was going to make it easier for all of those. So that's why like there's a huge emphasis now on like people are using V0 to like write other parts of their code. They're using it to answer questions and debug things that are like going wrong with Next, React, Tailwind, you know, any part of this like front end ecosystem. And like that's super exciting for us.
Sweet.
Oh, our theme's coming back. They might come back. They might not look like they do now, like they did in the old V0. We found that again, it was like people typically weren't trying to create like net new themes from scratch that often. And so like we had built out this way for you to build out new themes from scratch that like maybe wasn't the best approach for us. So we're experimenting a lot with ways on like how we can allow you to like integrate your custom configs into V0, or again, install unthemed, unstyled version from V0 and then quickly apply your themes when you actually use them locally. Yeah, we're experimenting with things like that.
Nice. I'd also say like the V0 team, it's super open to feedback. So if there's things about like the original V0 that you miss, yeah, let us know. Okay, another question. Can V0 write SQL?
Yeah, 100%. I don't write any SQL anymore. V0 writes all my SQL. If the actually easiest way to write SQL with V0 is set up a project that has a like access to your data schema, and then just have V0 write queries on the basis of that. So if you look here for a second. We have our schema uploaded here and like a custom instruction asking users, explaining to users how they should be using this feature. And what you can do is essentially from your schema, ask questions and like answer questions with SQL queries. If you set it up well, you can even, like I've set this up so that it like links you out to our like Postgres data querier anytime you ask it a question. So it becomes really easy to just like copy this, query the result, and like get back a response. We're hoping to try out some things that make this even easier so that you won't have to do this like link out to querying. Maybe a version where we like wrap around a connection string and an API key, and then like V0 has a like data table block that lets you like very quickly query things like this.
Lovely. Can back-end engineers use V0?
Yeah, 100%. You know, you can like use V0 to write APIs, to like do migrations, to like help interact with your database, like write, you know, utility functions, all of that good stuff. Basically any kind of code that you would write, especially in JavaScript or TypeScript, if you're using like a Node backend, all of that stuff is like stuff that V0 can generate.
Yeah, and I think it's something we're seeing is like, if you're someone who's super comfortable with a different framework or maybe backend a little more, V0 gives you the ability to be also a front-end engineer. So it makes that like going full stack thing a little less scary. In my case, I'm garbage at writing a lot of different CSS. I'm like super thankful whenever V0 makes something look beautiful for me, and I don't have to go figure it out. And I think that's true for a lot of folks. Just the like AI is kind of giving us the power to like hop across boundaries we used to be scared of. So I'd highly encourage, if you view yourself as a backend engineer, go ship a front end using V0.
Totally. Another question. this is actually a fun idea. Is there a library of public v0 generations?
So not yet, but we're actually actively working on an explore page for V0. Hopefully that should ship sometime next week, maybe like early the week after that, worst case scenario. We actually just had a new team member join. It's going to be his first project. So we're excited. It's going to be cool. I can maybe, just because there aren't too many people on this call, I can maybe share some designs for it, just so you can see what it's going to look like. Oh my God, unless Figma makes me update my page right now. Oh no, we're good. Okay. Give me 1 second, Perry. Maybe we can go to the next question while I pull this up.
Yeah, sure. Any plans to connect v0 to a Next repo so that it's context aware of your code base?
So I will come back to that one because that one is a cool answer.
Okay, okay. Wanted an easier one.
But here is a just like quick look. So we have a wonderful designer. Her name is Pran. She's phenomenal. But this is the kind of thing that you're gonna hopefully see in V0 soon. Like this is an explore-like page where you can filter by like different kinds of things that you might be like interested in seeing. And then we'll show you like either some hand-picked or like vote-based, like really good generations. We haven't yet exactly figured out what that, like how we're gonna pick which ones we show, but this is what it'll look like. Hopefully we'll ship pretty soon.
Very excited for that. Okay, now do you want to answer the Git repo?
Yeah, what was the question again?
It was just, are there any plans to get the ability to connect v0 to like a Next repo so that it has more context of your code base?
Yeah, there's two, we're kind of experimenting with two ways that could happen right now. One is like using a Git repo as a source. So right now you have like static files as sources, but we're internally experimenting with ways to like index your code base and then like allow you to ask questions or like use information from there. That's one possible option. Another possible option, like we might also do both, is like the ability to actually run your dev server or like, you know, run your application within V0 and then ask questions on the basis of that. So both of those are like ways that you could, you know, hopefully soon integrate more of your code base information into V0.
Nice. I got a Q&A from an anonymous attendee. I'm just gonna read it. It's not a question, but they just wanted to say that I manage a design team at an enterprise cybersecurity company and hope to completely replace Figma with V0. So using V0 for all their prototypes and graphics within the next year. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, we love folks who use Figma, but like, you know, V0 is doing that job for you. That's great.
Yeah, totally.
We do this at Vercel actually internally. Like if Guillermo has an idea for something now, he won't like go Figma it up anymore. He'll just like create the V0, like what it could look like. Creating something like real and clickable that people can jump into really quickly with like the best way to kick off a project is maybe even the wrong code, but like some code. So like going from that blank page problem to like, here's an initial stab at this problem really speeds up the like shipping velocity, I think.
Totally. And this actually, someone else asked this question, where does the name V0 come from? It's essentially that, like V0 gives you the initial version of the thing that you're trying to build.
Yeah, we're a developer company. Of course, we zero index around here. And so V0, I think Malta gets kudos for the name if I remember correctly.
Totally. This also kind of leads into another question about how V0 works for. So we talked a lot about how at Vercel currently we're using V0 like across a lot of different roles. Like people on the marketing team are using V0 to like spin up a quick prototype of a landing page. Someone asks, how does that workflow look like for like non-technical team members and like bringing something into production?
Drew, you want to take that one?
Yeah,
Otherwise,
there's kind of two paths, right? So there's the like if you want to share something and you don't want to actually deploy it, but you've got something you like and how it looks, you can publish the block in V0. I think that's an underrated way to like share the code and get people using it. If it all interacts on the client side, that's like a 9/10 working application. You don't need to actually go deploy it, which feels kind of weird. But if you do want to like follow through and actually get this deployed somewhere, just use that command that Ari was showing earlier in the top right, add to code base, and just run that in your CLI locally. And that will create that project. If you have a Vercel account, you can just easily use the Vercel CLI and just use the VC command. And just like that, it'll go deploy that project for you and get a URL for you pretty quickly. But yeah, those are kind of the two paths that I can think through. Surprisingly, Ari was just telling a story of like guiding someone who wasn't technical through the like terminal and getting that deployed, and it's actually not that scary.
yeah,
So
it
yeah,
was really cool. It was you know, our like head of internal comms. She's like never like did not know what a terminal was, like starting from zero basically. And you know, we like I was like, okay, here's a terminal, like here's lscd, like let's go to documents, like let's brew, like let's install homebrews, that like this is your package manager for your Mac. And then like let's now install node, like here is what npm does. And like all of that setup took a little bit, but after that, when I was just like, okay, like we got all the package managers and stuff set up, you like can have node running on your computer. That took like 10 minutes maybe of just like brew install. And then after that, it was just like install VC, or like, you know, Vercel, we have a CLI, you just do the Vercel CLI. And she had like a deployed project. And I'll share it in the chat here. And in like 30 minutes, she basically had a like working, like deployed application.
So cool.
Also, I see just because I just sent in the chat that like I love this previous question of like what is the like natural path for V0 to evolve to become. And I think like the best of both worlds between no code and highly custom code is actually a thing that we care about a lot. I think the problem with a lot of no code tools is like at the moment the tool is working, like, you know, you've built a really good application that people want to use. Suddenly you have to graduate off that tool, right? Like it becomes really hard to keep using something like Bubble for like a production application that thousands of people use. It's not to say it can't be done. It just becomes more and more difficult. The good part about like a tool like V0 is that like it's React and Next, you know, like, and you know, sometimes Svelte, Vue, Angular, whatever it is that you care about. It's like real code in a real front end framework, like really good engineers would write it. So you don't ever have to really graduate. Like you always have this repo that's just like any other Git repo with code just like anyone else would write it.
Nice. Okay, we have about 5 minutes, so I want to try to answer a few more from the chat. Any advice on how to get more reliable mobile responsiveness UI output?
Yeah, you have to ask, to be honest. Like we have tried a lot to like on our end try to get uh like mobile responsive UIs out of the box. And to be fair, I think most of the time V0 will try. The problem is it's like because like LLMs can't really see, like they don't really understand like overlaps and like these like really human things that we care about. They don't really get like the responsiveness problem. They try to copy things that they've seen like in other responsive layouts, which doesn't really translate over super well all the time. So the best way to do it is like, instead of just saying like, hey, can you make this mobile responsive? It's to describe the mobile responsive behavior you want. So it's like, hey, when this becomes smaller than a certain size, I want this like flex, like this row to become a column instead, you know, like, or I want this sidebar to go from default open to default close when the screen gets smaller. Like things like that is how you have to describe to it. I would think of it as like, if you're talking to like a junior engineer and you're a designer, like what you can't just tell them like, hey, can you make this mobile responsive? You have to let them know the kind of behavior you expect. And I think if you tell V0 that behavior, it's pretty good at replicating it. What it's not good at is just like, can you make this mobile responsive?
yeah, the instinct to say like don't do XYZ is actually not very good for LLMs, because then all of a sudden you just put XYZ in its context So yeah, what to Ari's point, like describe what you want, and then my trick is like avoid using don't, like, because you're gonna actually increase the chance of the thing you said don't happening, which is counterintuitive, but just how probabilities work.
Yeah. Can V0 rewrite legacy code to adhere to a new design system?
A new design system. It depends. It's pretty good at converting like component by component things over. Like the downside is you don't get previews if you're using like a custom component library or something like that. So it kind of depends. Like if you're moving from like, hey, I have this custom component, I want to write it in ShadCN, or I want to write it in Material UI. So if you're going from like custom to generic, like it's really good at that. It'll be really good if you just paste in your component and ask for a ShadCN or Material UI version. But if you're going the other way, where you're like, hey, I have a design system here and a second component, like I have one component library that's custom and I have another component library that's custom, like, can you map them? That's going to be a harder question because it's not going to have context. It's not going to have enough context on either of those. So you're getting like lost in two directions.
Yeah, one thing that this kind of made me think of how I've seen people use it right now in the wild. There's a decent number of people who are migrating from, framework 1 to framework 2. So we're actually seeing like a decent chunk of folks who are like maybe moving from Angular and they're moving to Next.js. So they need to convert a bunch of stuff to React/Next. And V0 actually does a really good job on a component by component basis, just like feed in the Angular thing and tell it to spit out next, and it actually does impressively well.
Nice. Okay, I think we'll do one more question. I saw a few people asking about this, but on Tuesday, Ari demoed a local development feature. Question about that specifically, will there be the ability to QA the proposed changes and see the diffs before applying?
Yeah, so V0 will show you the diffs first. Like the UI that's where we're thinking through is like in the block view, you'll first see like a file explorer with each file. When you click into it, you'll see the diffs that V0 has made to each of those files, and then you'll still see the preview. To actually save those back, like to save those into like the LLM's context and also save to your local file system, you'll have to click like apply changes or save changes, and that will then like accept the diff. And because we have code editing already, like you can edit code individually in there. Like that's the best way to like modify it if you don't like the diff that it's made. There are like thorny questions when it comes to things like that. Like for example, what happens if you like make a change in V0 and then you make a change in your like local IDE and then try to apply the changes from V0 into your IDE, and there's like merge conflicts. So like those are like some of the thorny questions we're kind of like thinking through. But in general, like that's the philosophy that we're expecting for this like edit flow.
Cool. Okay, I think we're at time. I just put up a poll on the screen, so please give us feedback about this session. And again, like I said, please let us know feedback about V0. Try it out. Share your generations on Twitter because we love to see what people are making. And yeah, thank you all so much for coming. We're going to try to do more of these sessions in the future.